I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan, and we are on an important topic today, and that is the topic of childhood eating disorders and obesity and how that begins to develop. Great book. It's called Naturally Thin Kids, and it's all about how to protect our kids from obesity and eating disorders for their life. And you can find out more. You can find the book at your favorite bookseller, or you can go online. It's an excellent website, Naturally Thin with Gene Antonello, and that's www.naturally-thin.com. And you can find this book, and you can find Gene's other books, How to Become Naturally Thin by Eating More. I mentioned that one earlier before the break, and also Breaking Out of Food Jail. Very, very interesting. I like the titles, Gene. If nothing else, I love the titles. And how did you get on this topic? Because what you're really talking about is normal, a normal relationship with food, a normal appetite, guilt-free eating, confidence in our body working right.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things seem to be what you're really talking about here.
All those things are what I'm talking about, and all those things are things that I didn't have for a long time in my life. I began to diet when I was 13 years old, and I didn't have a weight problem. I was just tall and muscular. But compared to my friends, my peers, I was just bigger than everybody, and it was a body perception problem.
Mm-hmm.
And although I didn't have a weight problem objectively when I started dieting, by the time I had dieted for a year, I had a weight problem.
Yep.
And I didn't make the connection at that time. I continued to diet off and on for 17 years, and my weight fluctuated about 50 pounds up and down. But I was miserable the whole time because I was starving most of the time, and even when my weight was going up, I was still trying to control my appetite. And that's what led me into researching obesity and eating disorders.
So you talk about famine sensitivity. What is that?
Oh, that's very important. That famine sensitivity is the genetic piece that plays a very important role in the development of obesity in certain kids as opposed to other kids. We all have a certain level of famine sensitivity, and it's basically inherited from our parents. Famine sensitivity just describes how sensitive an individual body is to the availability of quality food in the environment. In other words, some people, kids and adults included, can eat recklessly, they can eat late, they can eat poor quality food, and their bodies don't seem to react too much to that. They just stay about the same in their weight, at least for periods of time in their life.
Yep.
Other kids who are more famine sensitive eat recklessly at times, eat late, they go to hockey practice on an empty stomach, they do makeup eating later as a result of that. Their bodies are very, very sensitive or tuned in to their eating behavior, and they gain weight very easily as a result of that.
All right. So we need to understand that about ourselves then.
And it's so important for parents to assess each individual child in their family for famine sensitivity in order to pay attention and extra careful attention to kids who have higher famine sensitivity.
All right.
They don't need to eat less food. They just need to eat better food, and they need to be more tuned into their hunger signals.
All right. So, in other words, they may need to eat more often?
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Is that a key for some of us?
Yes, it is.
Not to eat really less, but in fact, like the title of the book I mentioned, Naturally Thin by Eating More.
Right.
So, in other words, the more is not more food necessarily, but more often.
That's true.
To not get yourself into a denial pattern.
Exactly. Making sure that your body is reassured, in a way, reassured that there is decent food available when the body is calling for fuel. And the hunger signals are simply the body calling for fuel.
All right, now, the other piece of this, and I've already mentioned the red and yellow signs. I mean, isn't it interesting that all the big chains have red and yellow in there? There's something to that.
Mm-hmm.
so, and we recently had a guest on the program, Dr. Norm Sheely. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he was talking about eating at the red and yellow signs, and he said, I ate there one time, and he said, never again. Never again in his life. He said, he said, several years ago I went in, I wanted to see what all the hoopla was up about, and they served me. He said, I looked at it, I took one bite, I wrapped it in the napkin, and he said, I'll never go back. And he called it, he said, that's dead food. He said, it's dead food. So my question to you, Jean, is what is good quality food? Because that's the other piece of this, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is, David. It's crucial for parents to understand what decent quality food is. And I like to keep it very simple. In my book, I have a list of real foods, which I consider decent quality foods, and I have a list of borderline foods, which are real foods that have a higher fat and sugar content, and pleasure foods, which are obviously for pleasure. They're dessert types of foods.
Right.
But real foods, which are high-quality foods, are high in nutrients and not particularly high in sugar, and sometimes they do have a higher fat content, but the high nutrient aspect counterbalances that. For example, cream cheese or peanut butter, nuts, all have a higher fat content, but they do have plenty of nutrients. So it doesn't follow the typical low-fat idea, but simply real meal foods that have high nutrient content that kids like.
All
Those
right.
are the kinds of foods we need to be offering to our kids.
Now, we also hear a lot about genetics. You know, that, little Billy just has fat genes. Is that true? I mean, are some of us more genetically predisposed for
David,
a kid being fat, or is that just it's like that's a form of denial?
Well, it's true, and it's not true entirely.
Okay.
And the part of it that's true is that statistics show, and research has really borne this out, that kids who come from a family where neither of their parents are obese have about 15% chance of developing obesity. If one parent is obese, it jumps to 40%. If both parents are obese, the likelihood of the child developing obesity is over 80%.
Wow.
So there definitely is a genetic trait there. However, I talked earlier about famine sensitivity, and I think this is the inherited piece. I think parents who are obese have high famine sensitivity. They really need to eat better than most people. They need to stick with really good, high-quality food. And their kids need to do that same thing in order to minimize this trait, because famine sensitivity requires not less food, but, again, better quality food and probably more meals more often.
I've always heard that breakfast is probably I've heard that it is the most important meal. Is that true?
I think in some ways it's definitely true, and I think the main reason is that it eliminates first off famine of the day. If you famine at the beginning of the day, the body gets the message that there is no fuel available in the environment, and right away the 5 biochemical responses, lowered metabolic rate, raised appetite, cravings for sweets and fats, preoccupation with food, and reluctance to move around, those biochemical changes begin to take place first thing in the morning. And by the time a person who has missed breakfast is at lunch, they're already likely to be doing makeup eating, and plenty of it.
I mean, look at even the name. It's breakfast, break the fast.
Break
fast.
the fast.
Yeah.
We need the fuel to stimulate our metabolic rate and to reassure our body that there's plenty of good quality food in the environment.
All right, but again, we want to listen to our bodies, right? Even at breaking the fast, we want to listen to what our body's telling us, because some people are, I know I work with people, and I myself, don't like a whole lot of food in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
A little something's great. And it's interesting, when I've been up later, well, then put a big breakfast in front of me and I'll devour it.
Interesting.
What's going on there?
Well, the body isn't something that anybody's body isn't completely predictable, and it's something that many people aren't aware of. So they expect that every day they can feed their bodies at exactly the same time, exactly the same types of food, and about the same amounts. And although the body's flexible, it's true that every day is likely to be different if you're paying attention. And what you're describing is your body sending signals peculiar to each day based on, in part, what happened the day before. That's how our appetites can go up if we increase our physical activity significantly. So it's so important, as you said, to pay attention to those body signals. And if you get up in the morning and look at the option of eggs and toast and ham, and it is absolutely unappealing to you, don't eat that. It's important to look and find food, perhaps fruit, granola, foods that do appeal to you, because your hunger signals and your appetite are meant to guide you into eating the foods that you need.
We are talking to Jean Antonello today. Very, very important conversation. Naturally thin kids. Protecting our kids from obesity and from eating disorders for the rest of their lives. We'll be back. Much more to come.